It's Wednesday, September 18th, 2024, and we are 47 days away from the election. Welcome to today's Make It Make Sense mini-episode. I'm Grant Herms. Today on the show, Kamala Harris sits down for her first major solo interview. So she sat down for a long interview with the National Association of Black Journalists in Philadelphia. She did an interview with a local station in Philly, but it was much shorter, and that was earlier this week, and this one with the NABJ had a much bigger reach. The 50-minute interview was really wide-ranging, but there were a few things that I want to talk about. I'm not going to talk about every single answer here. Harris, I'll start with this, is struggling to get her economic pitch trimmed down. What I mean by that is when she's asked about what a Harris administration economic policy would look like, she talks about all of her policy plans in what she calls the opportunity economy. That's her child tax credit plan, her plan to prevent price gouging on groceries, her housing plan, and her small business loan increase. All of those I've talked about before, but here's a quick reminder. She's pledged to both increase the one-time child tax credit and restore the continuing child credits to their previous level. She's also promised to put in place price caps on certain groceries and help smaller food distributors and grocery stores get preferential treatment in the market. Now, she's been criticized for that plan, but also got some vindication late last month when it came out that the CEO of Kroger, who is trying to merge right now with grocery giant Albertsons, said in court that they did, in fact, raise prices artificially on staple food. She's promised to double the investment into housing construction and promised to build millions of new homes. And she's also promised to give first-time home buyers $25,000 to put towards down payments. She says she wants to increase small business loans from $5,000 to $50,000, and she wants to extend that to something like 25 million more small businesses. So that's the baseline here. And Harris is doing essentially what I just did, and she also then weaves in her own backstory and then tells stories about sometimes hypothetical, sometimes real families or businesses and business owners to make her policies feel more grounded to people when they hear them. The problem is you get what I just did, which is sort of this stone-skipping thing on major issues for people. I will say that this is sort of necessary for her because she's still working to map out what a Harris presidency would mean for America. And with so little time left before the election, she's taking every chance she's given to say everything. And that's a choice by her and her campaign, but it does end up making the economic pitch just a little bit clunky. In the interview, she also really leaned into the successes of the Biden administration, especially if you're a Democrat, and the world the Biden-Harris administration inherited from the Trump administration. Now, we've heard that from her in the past. We heard it at the debate and in the interview she did with Tim Walz when she sat down with him and CNN. I bring that up because given how negatively people continue to feel about the economy, despite the actual numbers being pretty good when it comes to things like prices being down, inflation being down, unemployment being down, people still feel negatively about the economy and say that Trump will do a better job on handling the economy than Harris. So it wouldn't be outlandish for a candidate to lean into the bad vibes around the economy and put the blame on the sitting president, even if they are a part of the current administration. It wouldn't be hard for her to say, hey, I'm not in charge of the economy, nor am I behind the resolute desk. The president and I don't see eye to eye on everything. It's certainly something that we've seen plenty of times from Republicans do when they've been on a debate stage. In fact, Trump has done that to himself about his previous policies when it comes to the economy. Now, when it comes to Harris, that might be an unpopular choice for her, an unpopular route for her to take because Democrats, by and large, are happy with the Biden administration's record, having to deal with high prices and high inflation notwithstanding. The interview also moved into other policy areas, specifically Israel, where Harris again flexed her foreign policy muscles. She said multiple times that the best way to end the conflict in Gaza was to get a hostage deal done. And on that point, she sort of sidestepped questions about any future plans a Harris administration would have, saying Israel remains a close ally of the U.S. and has a right to defend itself. Now, she has said that in the past that she would like to see a two-state solution to allow Palestinians to have their own land and a right to self-determination. This is clearly something that she feels strongly about on both points, but it is on the minds of a lot of Arab American voters and liberal voters who have been really vocal about how unhappy and how unsure they are at best about Harris continuing those policies. There's been a lot of reporting in a lot of places, especially coming out of the important swing state of Michigan, where a lot of those same voters are straight up wondering whether they should be voting for Harris or voting at all. Now, as I say that, a brand new poll came out today showing Harris has a 5-point lead in Michigan over Trump right now, which is huge in that state. That poll, while we're talking about polling here, also found that she has a 6-point lead in Pennsylvania and is up a point, so statistically tied with Trump in Georgia, and she's currently leading in the national polls. She's had a really good week in the polls, but those were done before the second attempted assassination, so those things could change. But let's get back to the Harris interview here. She was also asked about her gun policy and whether she would still support an assault weapons ban. She said yes, and then also expanded that into her broader gun policy answer, which is things like supporting a universal background check and the normal list of things that we hear from Democratic politicians. And that was a part of the question, too, that the reporter asked, given that most gun violence in the country is done by people using handguns, not necessarily assault rifles. So those were some of the highlights on the policy, but there are 3 instances in this interview that I thought were maybe the most important parts. And not because of what her answers actually were necessarily, but it was the way that she answered them. The first one that stuck out to me was her answer on abortion, when she was asked about whether she would not only support returning the protections of Roe v. Wade, but also the restrictions that had been baked into that decision over the years, too.
We need to put the protections of Roe v. Wade back into law. And when that bill gets passed by Congress, I will proudly sign it into law. Understand what is happening in our country. Over 20 states have passed what I call Trump abortion bans because I understand how we got here. The former president handpicked 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade. They did as he intended, and in state after state, laws have been passed criminalizing health care providers. I don't know if anyone here has heard most recently the stories out of Georgia. Tragic story about a young woman who died because it appears the people who should have given her health care were afraid they'd be criminalized after the Dobbs decision came down. Laws that make no exception even for rape or incest, which means that you're telling a survivor of a crime of a violation to their body that they have no right to make a decision about what happens to their body next, which is immoral. An approach that doesn't take into account that most people, I think, agree you don't have to abandon your faith or deeply held beliefs to agree the government should not be telling her what to do with her body. If she chooses, she will talk with her pastor, her priest, her rabbi, her imam, but it should not be the government or Donald Trump telling her what to do about her own body and her life.
So the stuff about the Trump abortion, quote-unquote, abortion bans aside there, she gave a really human answer that I kind of found to be a signal or a nod to the part of the job that we call consoler-in-chief. And there's a better example of this I'm going to talk about in just a second, but it's the Bill Clinton, "I feel your pain" line, or Ronald Reagan, a better example, just after the Challenger disaster, this idea that presidents want to and understand that they have to lead with a certain amount of empathy when it's required of them. And I think that she did that here. It is also worth pointing out here that in this answer, she didn't actually answer part of the question about supporting certain restrictions that have been a part of the evolution, or what was the evolution, of Roe v. Wade. She dodged that by dipping into the empathy, which a political answer nonetheless, but is still something that I think gives us a good window into that consoler-in-chief idea. The next question, though, that stuck out to me was when she was asked about the alleged assassination attempt on Trump.
I checked on him to see if he was okay.
Yeah.
And I told him what I have said publicly. There's no place for political violence in our country. I am in this election and in this race for many reasons, including to fight for our democracy. And in a democracy, there is no place for political violence. We can and should have healthy debates and discussion and disagreements, but not resort to violence to resolve those issues.
On January 6th, your vehicle was allowed to kind of pass a viable pipe bomb. We've seen...
No, I was in the building.
You were in the building. And we've seen what's happening with former President Trump. Do you have full confidence in the Secret Service to protect all of you?
I do.
You feel safe for you and your family?
I do. But, I mean, you can go back to Ohio. Not everybody has Secret Service. And there are far too many people in our country right now who are not feeling safe.
So I found this to be really telling about how Harris thinks about character, and again, another really deft political answer. She could have blamed Trump's rhetoric or his predictable routine or 100 different things, but instead said that she said privately what she said publicly on that phone call with Trump, which I also think it's worth pointing out, too, that if the shoe were on the other foot here, I'm not sure Trump would reach out to Harris. I mean, this is a guy who made several jokes about the attempted murder of Nancy Pelosi's husband at the hands of a man who broke into their house with the intent on murdering Nancy Pelosi. So in this case for Harris, was it a political answer? Sure, to a certain degree, but did it also veer into a level of empathy? Absolutely. Well, finally, she was asked about threats in Springfield, Ohio, after lies have been spread this week, and they continue to be spread by Trump's campaign and his supporters about Haitian immigrants. And so far, there have been 36 bomb threats across the town of Springfield, including one that was made at an elementary school on Picture Day, no less. Here is Harris's answer to what she makes of all of that. It is long, but I'm going to play the whole thing, so bear with me.
I mean, my heart breaks for this community. You know, there were children, elementary school children, who it was school photo day. You remember what that's like? Going to school on picture day? Who were dressed up in their best, got all ready, knew what they were going to wear the night before, and had to be evacuated. Children. A whole community put in fear. And I'll say a couple things about it. One, you know, I learned a long time ago in my career, having a background as a prosecutor, when you have these positions, when you have that kind of microphone in front of you, you really ought to understand at a very deep level how much your words have meaning. I learned at a very young stage of my career that the meaning of my words could impact whether somebody was free or in prison. As Attorney General, I was of California, 5th largest economy in the world. I was acutely aware that my words could move markets. When you are bestowed with a microphone that is that big, there is a profound responsibility that comes with that. That is an extension of what should not be lost in this moment, this concept of the public trust. To then understand what the public trust means. It means that you have been invested with trust to be responsible in the way you use your words, much less how you conduct yourself. And especially when you have been and then seek to be again President of the United States of America.
Now, like I said before, it might be cringy to think about character or temperament in office, but when Harris talked about the responsibility of having a national platform and how she has understand her past roles, her current roles, and the role that she's asking Americans to vote for her for, I think that was a real window into how she thinks about these things broadly. The other thing is that these kinds of answers get written off a lot as a candidate just playing to a crowd, and they are that to a certain extent, and you can like her answer or not like her answers here, but as a voter, I think it's important not to tune out these questions or their answers because you get a level of introspection here that is important to pay attention to. Okay, that is it for today's MIMS Mini. Please rate and review the show if you haven't already. If you're on YouTube, like and subscribe. You can also subscribe to the Make It Make Sense Substack, where I've got bonus articles and interviews. And finally, please follow and share the show on social media. It really helps spread the word. It's MIMS News Pod. It's all one word, MIMS News Pod on every platform. I am at Grant Herms on X and at Grant Herms TV everywhere else. Thank you so much for listening today. I'm Grant Herms, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.